Bourbon Society, and we're here for another masterclass, this time with JoAnn Street from Russell's Reserve. We are going to learn about all things Russell's Reserve today, do a full tasting, and make a few cocktails. So let's get started. Hey, JoAnn.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. We are so grateful to have you and do this master class with you. Let's just dive right into it. Tell us about all things Russell's Reserve.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me again this year. I know we got to actually be in person last year.
Yeah.
The circumstances are a little different. That was a lot of fun, so I'm definitely missing New Orleans right now. But coming to you live from Louisville, Kentucky in my kitchen, my name is JoAnn Street. I am a portfolio ambassador for Wild Turkey and Russell's Reserve, some brands I hold very near and dear to my heart because I am fortunate enough to be part of the Russell family. So Jimmy Russell is my grandfather, Eddie Russell is my uncle, and then also Bruce Russell is my cousin / roommate. So we really are a family affair. You know, probably hang out a little too much sometimes, but that's the best part about our job. So the Russell brand is something that we hold very close to us because I think it is a true representation of what we really enjoy and love in bourbon. I know a lot of people may not or have forgotten that Wild Turkey and Russell's Reserve are under the same brand, but they are made the exact same way. So Jimmy Russell, our master distiller, started back in 1954. He is the longest tenured master distiller in the world. Back in September, he just celebrated his 66th anniversary at Wild Turkey. We keep thinking maybe he's going to retire, but definitely not. He is in it for the long haul, especially with how much Wild Turkey and the Russell's portfolio has got the opportunity to grow over the last few years. But this brand really came to life because of him and also because of Eddie, who's now entering a shy 40 years at Wild Turkey. So still got a few years to catch up to Jimmy. But between the two of them, they've got over 100 years of experience making these brands. At Wild Turkey, we're known for kind of being big and bold, and that's who we are. But the Russells is kind of a nice take on the softer side of Wild Turkey that we have to offer. You're still going to get kind of that punch that you like to find in Wild Turkey, but it is going to bring out maybe some more of those sweeter profiles that you're looking for, maybe some more vanilla or maybe a little bit of allspice, maybe some caramel, some oakiness. You're going to get that a lot more in these than maybe you would say a 101 or some other things in our portfolio. So to kind of start off the history of Russell's, so this kind of came to life back in the 90s. So Jimmy was nearing his 45th anniversary in the company back in the early 2000s. And Eddie wanted to do something really special because when we look at the bourbon portfolios of not only us as the Russell family, but of course, all of those wonderful people making bourbon here in Kentucky, we had people like Booker's, who Booker No already had his name on a bottle, and a few others. And Jimmy was still really making Wild Turkey at that time. And so Eddie wanted to do something really special for him for his anniversary, but also let him know that, hey, you've been in this industry for a very long time and you are so respected that you absolutely deserve your name on a bottle. So he kind of picked Jimmy's brain a little bit, went into the warehouse, found some barrels that Jimmy would frequently visit. And Eddie started tasting those barrels, realizing they were a little different than that typical, like I said, kind of big and bold punch that 101 brings in. These actually came from the center cut of the warehouse, so those 4th and 5th floors. That's kind of where we call our honey barrels or our sugar barrels are coming from. Mm-hmm. So Eddie went into those warehouses and found some of those barrels that I would say had been frequently visited, maybe some samples taken out of them, and he was really intrigued by what that was. And he slowly started tasting this whiskey. And the best part about it is Jimmy was also tasting this whiskey with him the whole entire time that Eddie was kind of producing this Russell's, but didn't really know what he was going to do with it. So Russell's Reserve really became a product in 1998, and that's kind of a nice tie-in to the vintage Russell's that you guys have seen come from us. But only a few special people got to try that original Russell's in 1998, and that happened to be a 10-year-old 101 proof. Jimmy loves whiskey that is 101 proof. If you ask him, his favorites are typically Wild Turkey 101, the Russell's 10, or the Rare Breed. Those are kind of his three favorite products in our portfolio. And so Originally, when the Russells came out, it was a 10-year-old, 101 proof, and the very first time that was released was in 2001. So big year for Jimmy, celebrating his 45th. The previous year, he had been inducted into the Bourbon Hall of Fame. So really kind of lighting this fire for the public and consumers to understand that he's here to stay. He's been a guy that's been in the industry for a very long time. He learned from a pre-prohibition distiller that also still kind of teaches those practices to Eddie and even Bruce now, as we kind of pass that torch down from generation to generation. Kind of as we move forward with the Russells portfolio, we start to incorporate rye whiskey. I would definitely say this is a little bit more of Eddie's kind of flair on the Russells portfolio, because Jimmy is headstrong. He loves bourbon. He knows how to make rye whiskey, but he is through and through a bourbon guy. So I would say Eddie kind of definitely put forth his foot a little bit with this Russells Reserve 6-year, and even so more moving into the single barrel bourbons. We've really seen single barrel come to life over the past few years, how different and unique every single barrel is. I think as the consumer becomes more knowledgeable about whiskey and bourbon in general, they start to pick up things, maybe those funkier notes that some more experienced drinkers may say. I think stone fruit is one of them. You think about charcoal, licorice, leather, instead of those typical vanilla, caramel, sweetness aspects, if that makes sense. To know, all bourbon at Wild Turkey is made from one mash bill, and all rye whiskey is made from one mash bill. So we are going, all of these products essentially go into the barrel the exact same way. It's all about that barrel maturation process. And I touched on that a little bit earlier, but these do come from the center cut of the warehouse. That's where we find some of our best whiskey aging, because Kentucky is known for having very distinctive seasons that actually creates a great kind of evaporation and absorption from the wood in the whiskey as it's aging. The Russells is also going to be a little bit older than everything else in our portfolio. You guys will notice some age statements on these bottles, as well as the single barrels are going to be a little bit older. Everything in our portfolio is 5 to 13 years old. So, right, to be a bourbon, it has to be made in the United States, minimum of 51% corn. It has to be aged for a minimum of 4 years to not have an age statement on it. And if it does have an age statement on it, that means there's absolutely nothing inside of that bottle less than that age. So this is kind of some of the really delicious stuff that we enjoy as a family, I think kind of brought to life in a portfolio. And that's why it's really exciting and so passionate of me to talk about it, because you ask any four of us, we all really enjoy the Russells 10. Bruce Russell thinks that this Russell's single barrel rye is one of the best things that we make. He is a big rye whiskey drinker. So although we are a family, we do have very different taste profiles from generation to generation, which is very interesting and unique to see. So to start out, let's start with the Russells 10.
Okay.
As we kind of taste through these, don't sit there and just kind of throw it back. I think we're all a mature audience at this point. Just make sure you sniff it, you're smelling it, you're tasting it. Maybe give it at least 3 sips before it really starts to open up on your palate. But we're going to start off with the Russells 10. This is going to be a 10-year-old small batch. So small batch for us is going to be about 150 barrels commingled, 150 barrels commingled together. Compare that to a large batch is going to be about 1,800 barrels commingled together. So this is going to be, we're going to be a little bit more picky about the barrels that go inside of this Russells Reserve 10-year. Jimmy and Eddie do pick all of the barrels that go inside of this. Like I said, this is kind of their baby. So Russells Reserve 10-year, when you sniff the nose, definitely give it a little swirl. You might get some citrus, some sweetness, some vanilla.
I get a ton of oak on this as well. It's very woodsy.
Mm-hmm. That's definitely being in the barrel for 10 to 12 years. So this is a 10 to 12 batch of bourbon. So you are going to get definitely those more prominent bourbon or the prominent barrel or like woody flavors.
Right. So there's definitely some tannins and some caramel in here too. Very like rich, warm caramel.
And very delicious as we kind of enter these like colder months as well. It's not too high proof, so it does sit at a 90 proof. It's just really delicious, neat or on the rocks. It just, for me, it really depends on the day. I think more so in the summertime on a rock, but in the wintertime, this just neat is really
Yeah. The
might
fall,
get a
and you start drinking. The fall is when I start pulling out Russell's Reserve and my Wild Turkey
right.
and my rare breed, especially. I make my cocktails with rare breed all the time.
I'm a big fan of rare breeding cocktails, unfortunately. I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but it is quite delicious for how great of a bourbon it is in cocktails.
Oh, wow. So I moved on to the taste, and this is very complex. It's a medium mouthfeel, so it's not a super heavy,
Mhm.
but it's got this great texture of like silky caramel for me that comes right on through. It's got some really strong vanilla notes in it as well.
I would definitely say that that spice that we talk about is a little bit more prominent on the back end,
Mhm.
but in a very nice kind of warming way. Kind of opens up that allspice and maybe a little bit of those kind of like darker flavors. I
Yeah.
think you still totally agree. You get a lot of vanilla, a lot of caramel, a lot of sweetness in this one. When I
Mhm.
took that first sip, it just kind of tasted really delicious and not chocolatey, but definitely caramel forward.
It's got some milk chocolate in it as well. I definitely picked that up on this
Hmm.
sip. But we don't like to say this word often in Black Bourbon Society, but it travels on your tongue so nicely. It's so smooth. It has a great texture to it.
I agree with you. The smooth word.
Mhm.
It's a work in progress, but sometimes it is a great way to describe it.
Right.
It doesn't hit you anywhere that it kind of packs a punch. It just so nicely opens up as it goes down, kind of really bringing out those vanillas, those caramels.
Yeah.
Um,
It does have some spices. There is definitely some allspice and cinnamon in
mhm,
there, but like you said, it doesn't sometimes the cinnamon or allspice, even in like a Wild Turkey 101, it'll stick,
mhm.
and this doesn't
Yep.
stick anywhere. This
Mm-mm.
yeah, you notice it, you acknowledge it, and then it dissipates.
So this is gonna be, like I said, a small batch, 10 to 12 years old, 90 proof. For being a 10-year-old bourbon, very delicious, very affordable. Which
Mhm.
is also a great thing about this portfolio is even though it is the higher end of our portfolio at Wild Turkey, still very affordable, still very delicious. You can tell that we're putting some of our best stuff in these products right here.
Absolutely.
So with our bourbon, we do use over 51% corn. We use barley malt, and then also rye in our mash bill. Can't tell you the mash bill because Jimmy might get on me, but we do add a decent amount of corn, some rye, and some barley. Our yeast is also going to kind of attribute to maybe a little bit of that spice you're going to taste in a lot of our whiskey as well. Um, but just all around really, really delicious when you're looking at it. A great bourbon to just sip or enjoy neat, but also very delicious in cocktails, which we'll get to in a little bit here.
Right.
Um,
Next on our tasting.
so we're gonna kind of switch. So I like to call these two like brother and sister. So we're gonna go to the Russell 6-year rye next.
Exhaust.
Um, so this is also another small batch bourbon. So right around that 150 barrel commingled together. But instead of being predominantly corn, this one's going to actually be predominantly rye whiskey or rye, pardon me. For us at Wild Turkey, we do make a Kentucky style rye, meaning that we do add a decent amount of corn to our rye mash bill. So it might not be, I think rye is a lot of the time kind of compared to Scotch, but not necessarily smoky or peaty. It's going to be a little bit more grassy, maybe some spice to it, but a little bit more earthy in a different way. And by adding a decent amount of corn to our rye mash bill, it is actually going to bring a nice sweetness to this rye whiskey, which is very unique and very different. So we make all of our own rye whiskey at the distillery in Lawrenceburg, Kentucky. That's where all of Wild Turkey is made. Typically, we run making rye whiskey about 2 to 3 weeks out of the year. We used to only make it a few days out of the year because rye wasn't a very dominant drink back in the day. More people were drinking, whether it be vodka or bourbon whatever that may be, rye just was not the thing. And we've really kind of seen this resurgence of rye whiskey come back to life in the past few years, especially because people like in your group, millennials, being behind the bar, bartenders love rye whiskey. It's always been kind of a sweet spot for them. So it's really exciting to see kind of this next generation come together and bring a different light of rye whiskey. So first on the nose. So this is going to be a small batch 6-year-old rye whiskey. Rye is typically on average about 3 to 5 years old, but we're going to age ours about 3 to 7 is going to be pretty typical for a Wild Turkey rye. 4 to 7. This one in particular is going to be that 6 to 7 years old because we do see that it has a age statement on the bottle, so it is going to be a little bit older. On the nose, I do get some spice.
Yep.
Maybe a little lemongrass.
Mm-hmm. Some bright fruit as well.
Mm-hmm. I was gonna, not citrus though.
I think it's even more like a red apple for me.
Mm-hmm.
I've been picking up lately is red apple.
But you can tell even compared to the first one that we tasted, that one was very dominant in that vanilla and that sweetness on the nose.
Right.
This one's almost a little drier.
Absolutely. You can pick up some of the spice in here as well, like you said, definitely.
Mm-hmm. That is delicious.
Yeah.
Like I said, I would say you're not necessarily going to get those sweeter flavors, maybe a little bit of drier flavors, but allspice, very, very dominant. I think in this one, you can definitely feel that rye come to life once it hits your palate.
Right, but there is some honey in here as well. It is it's whereas the bourbon, the 10-year, was more of the darker notes, like we said. It was
Yep.
caramel. It had some milk chocolate. This kind of swings to the other direction. It's got some honey in it,
Sweetness,
some bright apple notes in there. Not super sweet. It's not a jammy whiskey, but it is. It's a lighter. It's a lighter rye for sure.
absolutely.
And again, it's got that hint of spice in it, but it's not overpowering. It's not something that you feel sometimes with ryes, they're so spicy, they numb the top of your lip.
Yep.
Not do that at all. This is just, it's just pleasant and it makes itself aware and that's it.
I also think that this is a great rye whiskey to just kind of, if you're intrigued by the category, rye can be very intimidating. I think this is just a really great place to start because you are so right. A lot of the time, rye whiskey, it does pack a little bit of that spice and that bigness, if that makes sense. Whenever you take a sip of it, it lingers. But here, you kind of get that linger on the back end of the palate and you get that really delicious, like honey sweetness up front. And then just kind of opens up as it goes back.
Very well balanced. Both of these, to me, are very well balanced bourbon whiskeys.
Absolutely. And like I said, kind of brother and sister, being that they are both small batch. The oldest in the portfolio, the 10 coming out in 2001, and then this Russell 6-year coming out in 2007. So still relatively new when we're thinking about how long we've been making whiskey at Wild Turkey. We've been making whiskey there since 1942. For the longest time, all we made was 101 and 101 rye whiskey. But it's really nice to kind of see our portfolio expand, especially when you look at this Russell 6. I think this was just the beginning of kind of that explosion in our portfolio of the rye. Like I said, Jimmy knows how to make it, but he does prefer the bourbon a little bit more. It's exciting to see kind of Bruce and Eddie come in and give their perspective on rye whiskey.
So I have to ask, because we talked about the proof and we know that there is a love affair with 101. Let's revisit why they made the decision to drop it down 11 points on the proof for the 10 and the 6.
Sure. So I've talked to Eddie a little bit about this, and he wanted something a little bit more consistent, I would say, in the portfolio. We already had Wild Turkey 101, and we already had Rare Breed, which was also a barrel proof bourbon at that time. And we didn't really have something on the lower proof end of the portfolio. Now, that being said, you will probably never see anything at 80 proof come out from us at Wild Turkey. That's just not really who Jimmy and Eddie are. We do have an 81 proof, the Wild Turkey Bourbon, but that is probably about the lowest proof that they're willing to go. They wanted something maybe a little bit more approachable. Like I said, that doesn't completely overpower your palate or overpower a cocktail, if that makes sense. A majority of things in our portfolio are on that higher proof side, though. They are going to be in those 101s, 110s, 116s. So this was kind of a nice game changer in a way to bring in something that might be a little bit more approachable for that consumer that is a little bit more nerdy about bourbon, if that makes sense.
Totally. Both of these.
So absolutely. So we kind of tasted the original. Next two are definitely going to be a little bit more complex in the palate. We talked about those vanillas, those caramels, maybe some citrus, some apple, but these next two are definitely going to be even a little bit more complex than that because they are single barrels. So they are only coming from one barrel, again, still pulling from the center cut of the warehouse and still going into the barrel the exact same way as the earlier Russell's that we tasted. But I do want to make our way to the Russell single barrel bourbon first. So this is going to be the one that came out in 2013. So still relatively, like I said, new in the portfolio. With this being a single barrel, I think everybody really enjoys non-chill filtered whiskey. If we could non-chill filter everything in our portfolio, I'm sure that would be everybody's dream. But chill filtering essentially means that we're going to bring the temperature of the whiskey down to a certain degree, and that's going to allow those enzymes to essentially separate. So those fatty acids and those oils from the barrel are going to separate out of the liquid in the water from the bourbon. And we're going to take those out typically in everything in our portfolio, but with our single barrels, we're actually going to keep those fatty acids and those oils from the barrel inside of this bourbon. So these are actually, because what do we love most in food? Fat, right? We love things like cheeseburgers and pizza and French fries. So we're not taking any of that really delicious flavor from the barrel out of either one of these next two that we're going to try. So for us, this Russell's single barrel bourbon is going to be a minimum of 9 years old. So a little bit younger than the 10, but that's just because it is coming from one barrel. It's already packing a lot of flavors to it. So minimum of 9 years old, and this one's going to be 110 proof. So we are making quite a jump from the 90. If you do, definitely one that you're going to need to take a sip or two of before your palate really acclimates to the high proof of this one that we're trying this afternoon. But on the nose,
it's amazing.
It just kind of makes you happy and giddy inside.
It does. It's just like a warm hug in a glass. It is just so inviting, and like you could just spend 5 minutes just nosing and really appreciating the notes that are just here, the olfactory, sensory, the memories that come up. This is just this is a brain trigger.
I feel like you know it's going to be delicious when you smell it, and my mouth is already watering from just the nose on this alone. A lot of tobacco, maybe a little licorice in this.
Tobacco, licorice, a little bit of leather, like an old cognac couch leather, like.
Yes.
Yeah, this is a whole mood.
And then one other thing I want to note is when you do give this a nice swirl in the glass, if you look at the edge of your glass, might be a little bit harder to tell on mine, but you'll see these legs on it. And the legs on this bourbon are just absolutely incredible. You can see it just holding on at the rim of where you've swirled that around, and it just makes it even more appealing to drink.
I even want to say there's a little touch of like apricot that is trying to like come out in this too. Just a touch of stone fruit. Just, you know, it's not overpowering.
Funny enough, on that first sip that I just took, I got a big mouthful of just like dried fruit. I don't know if it's apricot or maybe even some like cherries. But right immediately on that front of the palate. And we could also be tasting very different single barrels right now. So that is kind of the beauty of a single barrel. whatever we're talking about, you may taste something completely different, and that is totally okay. Everybody tastes a little bit different from one another. We could be tasting very different single barrels right now. That's kind of the fun enjoyment of getting to have things like this.
And it's super creamy too. I almost want to say I've been noshing on some bourbon balls. Someone sent me some bourbon balls recently, and it's like that inside filling of like a bourbon ball. It's got this creamy texture to it.
Yep.
Almost kind of like I don't want to keep saying caramel, but it's like this I don't know.
I know exactly what you mean. And that's kind of that's the beauty of non-chill filtration, is it is, even if you compare to the first two that we just tasted, that you nailed it right on the head. The creaminess from non-chill filtration, it just really kind of coats your whole entire mouth, and something that is chill filtered.
Yeah. Like I don't know if you've ever had like pecan rolls, but it's like the that keeps the pecans rolled together.
Yes.
That, but that's what this is. Definitely buttery notes. I'm getting some butter and a cream texture. Maybe even marshmallow, but not as like super sweet, because this is a bourbon for sure.
Marshmallow is a great way to put it. I was gonna say a little dark chocolate, maybe.
Yeah, but not too. It's not drying like a dark chocolate, but
yes,
it's got cacao in it, for sure. Yeah, this is delicious.
And also, don't be afraid to add a drop of water to this as well. That also really helps to open it up. I've been fortunate enough to enjoy these quite a bit, so but don't be afraid. Yeah, don't be afraid to add a drop of water to any of these products. It'll change the proof even just like a point or two, but that will make the biggest difference in opening it up and maybe taking away that initial heat that you get on the front end.
But the heat, what's the proof on your bottle?
Mine's 110.
Same here. So this is 110 here for me. It's not a hot 110 at all. Again,
no.
You notice that spice. You do notice the cinnamon. That's indicative of all wild turkey expressions, but it doesn't overpower.
Right.
It's not like a big red. It just complements the flavors that are there.
It warms you very nicely on the inside. That type of spice. Nothing that's gonna make you breathe fire by any means.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, I don't want to put this down. I'm being very honest with you right now.
Yeah, agreed. It's delicious.
And I feel like even the more sips I take, the more it's just opening up and becoming more flavorful.
Yeah. That's kind of great. And so kind of going back to your dark chocolate note that you picked up, I think that definitely plays into the mouthfeel, right? Like it is a little drying, like it's leaving a texture on the top of my mouth and on the side. Almost like a suede feeling, so it's it's a smooth, but it's more of a suede texture that leaves lingering in my mouth.
It's definitely one, I would say, even more so compared to the Russells. This one is one that kind of lingers and I feel like continues to open up, especially right here. Yeah, I was gonna say I'm feeling kind of that spice. I would say you'd feel that spice kind of once you hit here on your palate. And even just like continuing to open up in that mouthfeel is really great as we keep talking about it.
It's a hug. It was a hug from the moment I nosed it all the way and it's definitely a hug.
Absolutely. So that would be the one that's bourbon. So 110 proof, non-chill filtered, minimum of 9 years old. So still on that higher age end of our typical wild turkey portfolio. Still going to be a little bit more mature in that barrel, a little bit longer, but a lot of really great flavor. Like I said, it is going to be a little bit more complex than that first one that we tasted. I think we almost named everything on the wheel right there with that single barrel bourbon.
Yeah.
So the newest one in our portfolio, this one actually came out in 2015. So this is going to be the Russell Single Barrel Rye. This originally came out about 5 years ago now, so very, very new still to this day. And if you ask Bruce, this is probably before the rare breed rye came out. This was his favorite thing in our portfolio that we had, because this is very close to barrel proof. This one is actually, instead of 110, it is going to be non-chill filtered as well, but it's going to be 104 proof. That is kind of an odd number for us at Wild Turkey because we are kind of dedicated to that 90, 101, 110 kind of framework.
Right.
But what's really interesting about this is whenever I talk to Eddie about getting this proof, he said whenever they're tasting, they actually will take it down by like half a proof point at a time. So he'll taste that 5 or 104 or 103, all the way from barrel proof down to as low as they want to take it, essentially. And he said he kept tasting it at 105. He really wanted to try and get as close to barrel proof as possible, but as he was kind of tasting down the proof, he said 103 was just not tasting right, and 105 was a little too spicy in a way than he wanted to come out for a Russell's rye. So he said that 104 proof point was kind of that sweet spot for this single barrel rye whiskey. So again, non-chill filtered. This one's going to be a minimum of 7 years old. So still on that higher age range of that rye whiskey. And this one's going to be very different than that single barrel bourbon that we just.
Oh, absolutely.
Again, the legs on this, absolutely incredible. All right, so on the nose, definitely still get that kind of honey. It's very dominant in this single barrel. I get more of those kind of like earthier, grassier in a very weird way. What's the word I'm looking for? Dryness. I'm trying to figure out a word to describe that.
I don't know. For me, I'm getting dried fruits off of this, but more,
Yes.
but more on the plum side. Yeah. I mean, it's yeah, I'm getting more plum, more bright red fruits on this.
You can definitely still smell that vanilla, that kind of caramel aspect.
Yeah, it smells like dessert, honestly. It's got some vanilla in there. There's a little bit of tannins, but not a lot.
I would say it's not even spice, maybe a little bit more so like black pepper.
Yeah, a little bit of pepper. Maybe some like I want to say licorice, but more along the lines of like a red licorice, like a red vine, or like there's a candy note. There's a hard candy note in there as well.
Like I'm getting a little orange.
Yeah.
Like kind of like an orange candy, like those little I have no idea what they're called, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Orange wedge. Yes.
Yes. And then that first taste is just, I mean, you get, like I said, a little bit of that orange, maybe some like lemon honey in a very weird way.
Yeah. And I got a little bit of hay as well. Like there's, I got a little bit of hay in there, but it definitely brings bright. Definitely some citrus notes, lemon, like some lemon rind, sweet orange though.
Yes. Yes. You are right though. It does it just tastes like dessert. Like when you think of, we talked about this earlier, but when you think of rye, you think of spicy, kind of earthy. This is very uniquely kind of sweet, and those kind of honey and lemon peel.
Yeah.
Even a little bit of like pepper on the palate.
Yeah. A little bit right here on the tip of your tongue. Just a little note of
Yep.
like pepper.
And again, made the exact same way as the Russell 6-year rye. So that Kentucky style rye, we've still got that decent amount of corn in there. But you can tell like that rye grain is very dominant when you were talking about like the hay.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. That's good. It's got a great mouthfeel too.
Yeah.
A little bit of oil, so it definitely coats your tongue.
It lingers on your lips.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Delicious.
Well, I'm like, do we even need to make cocktails? Because I kind of want to revisit.
I think we totally should make cocktails because it shows the versatility of the entire portfolio. So because
Absolutely.
this whole entire line can be appreciated neat and can also make a killer cocktail.
Absolutely.
So let's dive in. Where do we start with that?
Let's do it. So I'm going to move some things aside here so you guys are able to see my little bar mat. We're going to start off with the Russell's 10-year.
Okay.
Bring this up a little bit. All right. So we're actually going to make, I think, my personal favorite cocktail. I love Boulevardiers. I grew up not drinking very bitter things like most Americans, I feel like. And Bruce actually kind of brought me in to Campari. I now love Campari. I love things bitter. And so this was kind of a nice way to tie in maybe if you, again, are intrigued by the category, but going in and enjoying a Campari neat is not for you. It is a great modifier in a cocktail. This Russell's 10 also, though it is at that 90 proof, with the Campari and the vermouth, this holds up so beautifully in a cocktail. You can do this neat or on the rocks. It's completely up to you, but super simple to make at home. I know we're not all able to kind of get out there these days and visit our favorite bars. So definitely something you can impress your friends with at home. It's very easy to make. So we're going to start out. We're going to do an ounce of the Russell's Reserve 10-year-old bourbon. And we're going to mix this. So we are going to do it in a mixing glass here. Got this really beautiful one. You can do it in a glass at home, really whatever you have. But we're going to start off with 1 ounce of Russell's Reserve. Dump that right into the mixing glass. Next up, we're going to add our Campari. So this is going to be a bitter from Italy, very common over there. We're also going to do 1 ounce of Campari. Dump that right into that mixing glass along with that bourbon. And last but not least, we're going to add vermouth. So we're going to be using a Chinzano Vermouth 1757. I have the older bottle. You'll see that new label come out. I can't find any here in Kentucky. We're going to do also 1 ounce of this Chinzano Vermouth. Word from the wise, after you open your vermouth, put it in the refrigerator. Vermouth belongs in the refrigerator once it's open.
I have my refrigerator will be like, I'd have to get a separate refrigerator just for all of my vermouths.
That is so funny. And then we're just going to add ice to this mixing glass. We're going to give it a nice stir.
I forgot my ice thing, so I'm going to just use my hands. My hands are clean, everybody.
You're at home too, so doesn't even matter.
Okay.
And we're going to give this a nice stir for about 20 to 25 seconds. Again, you can use whatever you have at home. It could be just a regular glass. I am guilty of mixing cocktails with just like a knife sometimes. So just whatever you have on hand. So we'll give that a nice stir there. And I'm actually going to serve mine on the rocks. That's how I prefer mine. I'm going to do mine on 1 large cube. I'm also going to be using my hands. So 1 large cube in a rocks glass. And then we're just going to give this a nice strain over that rock. Looks so delicious in this red color.
Yes, it's beautiful. There you guys go.
And then to garnish, you can do an orange wedge if you like, but I'm actually going to do an orange peel. So it's gonna have some aromatics on that peel that are gonna bring out some really delicious, kind of refreshing flavors in that cocktail. I'm just gonna give my orange a nice slice right here.
Okay.
Make it look nice and pretty real quick. And then you're gonna want to express these oils over top of this cocktail. So when you do express it, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on the camera, but it is going to express that oil from that orange over this cocktail. Give it a really nice nose whenever you take a sip. Give that a nice spin. And there you have a very delicious Boulevardier. Super simple to make at home. Like I said, you can serve this neat or on the rocks. Cheers.
Cheers to you, JoAnn. Delish.
I mean, that's pretty delicious. That is pretty delicious.
Yeah.
So I tend to like something that's either a little bit more bitter or a little bit sweeter. So I'm a big like old-fashioned Boulevardier girl. But also a other really delicious cocktail to make with bourbon is a Manhattan. So that's kind of the beautiful thing about bourbon is it goes really nicely with all of those classics that we enjoy. The Boulevardier is part of the Negroni family. So, right, we have the Negroni, which is made with gin. This one's going to be made with bourbon. So if you go somewhere and they're not sure what a Boulevardier is, it's a Negroni with bourbon. That's all it is. I sometimes like to use 1.5 ounces of bourbon, you know, depending on the day. But for the most part, super simple with that 1-1-1 ratio, mixed, poured over a large cube. You're set to go.
Right. And so there's different variations of a Boulevardier, a little bit of 1.5 to 1 to even to a half of the vermouth or the Campari, depending on if you want it more bitter or sweet. Our members just did a cocktail class where she presented a 3-2-1. So yes. 3 bourbon, 2 Campari, and then 1 vermouth. And it was fantastic.
That does sound delicious.
Around with that, with the combination, but the traditional is definitely a 1-to-1-to-1. So you
right.
never forget it. Yeah.
Exactly. And even we are being at home a little bit more. That's kind of the fun thing about these very simplistic cocktails is you can change it up very easily and it can change the whole entire aspect of the cocktail. Use a different vermouth. Maybe instead of the Russell's 10 bourbon, maybe you try it with rye whiskey instead. There's so many little things that you can do to this one very simple cocktail to really either elevate it or change it to your liking, like you said.
Yeah. All right. Well, cheers to you.
Cheers. I know. I'm like, I might have to enjoy this now.
Yeah. And JoAnn, we had so much fun in New Orleans with you last year. This is fine. You know, this is fine for 2020.
Yeah. I've already accepted where we're at for 2020. I am just all fingers crossed that we're finally back together and cheersing. I don't mind cheersing over Zoom, but cheersing in person is so definitely much better.
Out of our kitchens that we don't have to clean.
I know. I'm always in the background. Is everything look nice on the countertops? Is all the bourbon perfectly placed? Type of situation. So now that we have something bitter, I think we should go to something a little bit more maybe sweet, or even as we enter kind of this fall season, a really delicious, or even around Thanksgiving, a really delicious kind of warming cocktail. So I think we're going to make a Manhattan next. Are you a big Manhattan drinker?
So I am, and again, because I've got a gazillion different vermouths in my house that I'm not concerned about, we make all types of Manhattans. So we make reverse Manhattans, traditional Manhattans, a little bit of dry and sweet. We do We do all of them. So, but I will say, I've never done a black Manhattan with Averna. So
Varna.
I'm really excited about doing this one today.
Yeah, so we'll actually start with Averna. This is another product in the Campari portfolio. Yeah, I dump my ice. I'm using the same mixing glasses. The less dishes, the better. So we're gonna actually make kind of a riff on a black Manhattan using Averna. So this is another bitter, a part of the Campari portfolio. This is made over in Italy as well. But this is kind of a nice way to change this up again with this cocktail. You could use something like Averna, you could use something like Cynar. There are so many different vermouths out there that this again is another cocktail. Super simple to make at home, but also super simple to change up a little bit. So we're gonna start off with 1 ounce of Averna. We're gonna dump this again into a mixing glass. So this will also be a stirred cocktail. So we're gonna go 1 ounce of Averna right into that mixing glass. And typically with Manhattans, we see rye whiskey being used. So we just made you a really delicious bourbon cocktail. Now let's kind of appeal to maybe those rye whiskey drinkers out there as well. So we're gonna be using the Russell 6-year-old rye whiskey that we just talked about. And we're actually gonna do 2 ounces of rye to this 1 ounce of Averna. So 2 ounces of rye whiskey right into that mixing glass.
Okay.
And then we're going to again add some ice to this. Oh, and last but not least, can't forget our bitters. So I'm just using Angostura bitters. You can use whatever you want at home. Give it 1 big heaping dash of bitters into that glass.
I tend to overdo it with bitters. So I've got a small sample of orange Hella bitters that I'm using for this. And
being
then
controlled.
Ice.
Yep, so ice right into that mixing glass again. And then again, like we did with the Boulevardier, we're gonna give this a nice 20-second or so stir.
All right, stir away.
Stir away, I know. All right, so we gave that a really nice stir, and we're actually going to serve this one neat. So again, completely up to you if you prefer it on the rocks, but Manhattans are typically served up in a cocktail glass. Mine is in the freezer, but as Samara pours hers over her glass, I will be right back.
Okay, so I'm just gonna pour mine into a coupe glass.
And I also have a coupe here, but I did just chill mine in the freezer for a few minutes before I'm gonna pour this cocktail in there.
Beautiful color on this.
The color is just screaming holidays and warmth. And then to garnish this cocktail, typically you would use a cherry, but I'm actually gonna use a lemon peel. So just kind of whatever you have at the house. And then I think
both.
Even better.
Okay.
So completely up to you, but I'm just gonna use a lemon peel today.
I'm putting 2 filthy cherries at the bottom of this cocktail. And then lemon.
Yep, and you can just express that lemon right over that cocktail as we did with the Boulevardier. Then I'm just gonna give mine a nice cut.
Okay.
So we've got a really beautiful lemon peel here. And I'm actually just going to put that
with a little bit of the lemon as well. Don't forget to do that.
Put that right on the edge of that cocktail. And you've got a very beautiful Manhattan. Awesome. Cheers.
Cheers, JoAnn. Oh.
That Averna has got that that silky and creamy mouthfeel that we were talking about earlier with the single barrel bourbons.
And some there's some rich
chocolate
in here. Oh God.
Yes.
That is delicious.
You could even add some like chocolate bitters to this to really kind of emphasize that sweetness if you're looking for more of like a dessert cocktail, but really delicious, warming on the inside, screams cold weather, sitting
Yeah.
by a fire right now.
Yes, this is like this is like sitting lakeside, watching the moon come up, like
Mhm.
what you want to have in hand.
This is delicious. Again, like we talked about, super simple to make at home. You could change up the vermouth that you're using. We used Averna this time. You could use something like Cynar or Chinzano, whatever that may be. But a nice way you could change up the bitters. If you go to your local kind of like spirit store, I'm sure they've got a plethora of bitters on the wall. That's a nice way to change it up as well. But this might have just changed my attitude as we enter holiday season with this cocktail.
Yeah,
Yeah, the color is great, beautiful.
everything. Absolutely. Well, we have learned all things about Russell's Reserve today. So we've done the Russell's 10-year, the single barrel, also Russell's Rye 6, and its single barrel as well. Of course, we have always, we love the story of the Russell family really taking over Wild Turkey and just taking it to new heights over the decades, right?
Mhm.
And we've drank some amazing, amazing cocktails. And classic bourbon cocktails, bourbon forward cocktails,
Mhm.
rye forward cocktails that really do show off its essence, right? In
Yes.
with vermouth or mixed with a bitter and so forth. So, where can we what are the price points? Do you know the price points of all of these expressions? And where can we find out more information about Russell's Reserve and all of the things?
All of the things. So a majority of the time, it just depends on your state, but the Russell's Reserve 10-year is going to range in between that $30 to $40 range for the most part. The Russell's 6-year will be right around that 42 to 46 price range. So the small batches both being very affordable. This Russell's single barrel bourbon, this one's going to run up about $60 is pretty average for the Russell single barrel. And then for the single barrel rye, you're going to be looking upwards of about $72, I would say, is pretty average.
Yeah.
Rye does just tend to be a little bit more expensive. To find more about Russell's or just the Wild Turkey portfolio in general, visit us at wildturkey.com. You can find cocktail recipes, things that we made today. You can find all the knowledge about the Russell family. Also follow us on Instagram. Instagram, I feel like, has been a nice light, especially during these times. So at Russell's Reserve Bourbon for the Russell's Reserve portfolio, at Campari America. Also a great place to follow if you're kind of curious about Campari, bitters, vermouth. They're going to be showing a little bit more about the whole portfolio. And then, of course, you can follow me on Instagram. I would love to answer all of your questions about Russell's Reserve or Wild Turkey. That is why I'm here. It's at JoAnn Street. So please give me a follow. If you guys, even in the future, think of any questions, don't hesitate to reach out. That's why I'm here. I have a very hard job of having to talk about whiskey all day. So I would love to answer those for you.
Thank you so much, JoAnn, for doing this masterclass with us. We love you. We miss you.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to hug all of you again.
I know. We miss you so much. We had such a ball in New Orleans last year. And we really just can't wait to do this again, in person.
In person.
But thank you so much for going through the portfolio and the cocktails, and we'll see you real soon. We'll see you
real soon. Thank you so much for everything that you do and definitely being a light during this time. So I can't wait to see you all. Cheers. I hope you guys have a great week. Soon enough.
Soon enough. Cheers.